To start, Desert Island Decks. Now, if I'm very lucky, I've got a Conley Woods on the line. Hello, Conley, how are you?
You, sir, are very lucky.
Look at that! It's a Conley Woods, everybody!
Hello.
Fantastic. So, as you can see on your screens, Conley is from the United States of America, currently living in Denver, Colorado. Is that correct, Conley?
That's correct.
Okay, so he is literally a mile high, as we like to say, a content provider at channelfireball.com. Fourth at Pro Tour Honolulu 2009, when he wore the very lovely, what are they called, Leilani or something?
Just a lay.
Yeah, just a lei, that's right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Leilani goes to school with my daughter, that explains it. So that was fourth Pro Tour Honolulu. He was third at Worlds. In 2011 at San Francisco, along with everyone else on Team Channel Fireball who were in the top 8. In fact, pretty much they were the top 8, except crucially, they weren't the top 2, which was a bit awkward. But we'll get into that, I'm sure. 5 Grand Prix top 8s. I was very privileged to be there in 2012 in Orlando, Florida, when Conley claimed his Grand Prix title. And I'm pretty sure, was that Patrick Chapin in the final, or was that the semis you played?
No, he was. That was the finals.
Yeah.
Also, it's actually 6 Grand Prix top 8s because they have not changed the team's event that Efro, me, and Owen got third in. But technically, that was a top 4, so it counts as top 8.
It does. It does. That's shameful. Yeah. I will have to kill the graphics department for you. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to get into the world of Conley and his Desert Island decks. But first, don't adjust your sets, people at home. I'm going to show you this picture. Let's see what happens when I do this. Oh, look! It's a montage of Conleys. Fantastic. So you are looking there at Conley at various stages through his youth. And Conley, I know you probably can't actually see this picture just yet because of the delay on the stream. So I want to ask you, first of all, the wedding picture. Who exactly are you being page boys for there?
Oh, that's my mother and father, biological, both.
Right, okay.
And then that is my brother on the other side. He's 2 years younger than me.
Okay, and younger and smaller. So you're the big one and he's the little one.
I mean, he's 6 foot tall and
now
and hefty, but I am 6'5", so I tend to be bigger than most people. Yeah,
that is certainly true. Now, hopefully by now the program's caught up, so you're looking at the same picture we're looking at. So. How old are you in that bottom left picture, which looks very much to me like a high school, middle school picture?
Yeah, that's right after I lost a bunch of weight in like 6th or 7th grade. I was pretty fat and getting made fun of a bunch, so I took up basketball and like went on this terrible diet for me that involved like lean cuisine every day plus like a banana, and that was it. And I basically starved myself, and I lost a ton of weight. But that was like 7th or 8th grade, like that range.
Okay, and then what about top right? Because that's a little bit younger, right?
That was my top right. That's my high school graduation photo, I think.
Oh, wow. So what, are you sort of 16, 17 there?
Yeah, 17 probably.
My Lord, you look young there. Now the one I do have to ask about, obviously, is bottom right, Superman and Batman. Were you a superhero kid growing up?
I definitely, well, my cousin, who we called my uncle, who had a big part of raising us, was very, very nerdy into computer games and comic books and Dungeons and Dragons. And my dad was also into that as a result. So we kind of just had that like atmosphere growing up, even though they weren't like, I wouldn't call them gamers per se. They were certainly into that subgenre of the culture of the time, the 70s, 80s. And so we were experienced with that. So it was kind of cool. You know, every boy loves that kind of like fantastical world anyway, but we just had an excuse to go a step further.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's get to your Desert Island decks, and we are going to begin with the 4 decks that you did play at some point. So we're going to kick off with Grand Prix Dallas in 2007. This is extended, and this is a deck called Blue Red Trash for Treasure. Now, so let's see what can I pick up here. Yes, a vaguely reasonable mana base full of actual blue and red lands for the most part. 3 Sundering Titan, then 2 Chrome Mox, 2 Crucible of Worlds, 2 Demon Fire, 2 Factual Fiction, 4 Signets of the Is-It variety, 3 Mindslaver, 2 Oblivion Stone, and then we get sort of settled into the 4 ofs: Remand, Thirst for Knowledge, Trash for Treasure, and Wildfire. Conley, what's going on with this deck?
So this played at my first ever Grand Prix. Prior to this, I had played in 0 PTQs. I basically had done nothing but play in Friday Night Magic, and then I also played proxy vintage tournaments. That was kind of like the first thing I got involved in when it came to competition. But yeah, it was mono Friday Night Magics, and then we were like, hey, there's a Grand Prix in Dallas coming up. It's 6 months out from now, because that's how long you prepared for Grand Prix, apparently.
Yeah.
And yeah, me and my buddies just tested in my dorm room all freshman year, basically, for this Grand Prix. We drove down to Dallas, and this was the deck I basically tested the whole time. I tested this against like 40 decks in the format. I was making up decks that like didn't exist to test this against, and it used cloud.
No. We've lost to Conley. That's not fair. He was mid-flow. Conley, I've lost you just for a minute. Let's see if we can get you back. Can you hear me, Conley? Oh, we're trying to get the call back.
Yeah, I should be back. I'm sorry.
There we are. Don't worry, Conley. That's all right.
So where did I leave off?
So you just about you'd got there and you go down. So you've tested against 40 decks and you get down to Dallas. And then what?
Oh, sure. And so I had 3 buys based off of my rating, which I had climbed up to over 2,000 just off Friday Night Magics, which I guess is kind of impressive.
Wow.
But it was like 3 years of Friday Night Magics. But yeah, I decided to play this deck. It was super cool, big mana engine with Vesuva and Cloud Post, and also I had Chrome Moxes and Is it Signet? And yeah, and then you would use Wildfire basically to set your opponent's back, destroy their mana as well as their creatures, hopefully. And then you would use Crucible World, start replaying everything, and you would eventually take over the game with a Mindslaver lock or just getting back Sundering Titans a bunch of times. And the fact that you could occasionally just be like, end of turn 2, cast a Thirst for Knowledge, untap on turn 3, trash or treasure out Sundering Titan, and just like wreck a board, gave you this kind of explosive start. So I actually took this deck all the way to 10th place. I was tied with the 8th place slot, but I did not make it in on tiebreakers. Me and Terry, no, it wasn't Terry, so I don't remember who, but it was some other big name pro at the time. I was really excited to play him. I ended up losing to him and then getting 10th. So I was kind of bummed, but it was my first Grand Prix ever. So I came home with this big paycheck. I was able to get my dad excited about the game for the first time, and it was kind of like the point where I was able to start looking at Magic as more than just a weekly kind of hobby type thing, because my dad was like, wow, you can actually make money at this, and you can actually do pretty well. So it was kind of like my breaking point. Did that first Grand Prix. After that, I started going to PTQs and whatnot, and competitive Magic sort of entered my life.
All right, so let's move on to deck number 2 of Conley Wood's Desert Island decks. We move to 2009. It's an extended deck. It's PTQ Albuquerque, and it is Naya, Boom, Bust. Now, as you can see, I'm on the bottom left of your screen, and I'm in the way of a large majority of the lands, because this mana base is foolish. 4 Flagsons of Tracair, a forest. You've got Forgotten Caves, Ghost Quarter, Horizon Canopy, Mountain Plains. Well, at least I understand what the one-ofs of those are doing. 3 Sacred Foundry, but then 1 Secluded Steppe, 2 Temple Garden, 2 Tranquil Thicket, 1 Treetop Village, 1 Treetop Village. Now, seriously, Conley, what is going on? Never mind what the deck does. Just try and justify the mana base, if you would.
Well, basically the mana base, because these lands all get recycled by Life from the Loam. And there's 4 Life from Loams in the deck. It's not like a deck where we have to dig for forever. If we find 1 Life from Loam and we're good. Because of that, we wanted a lot of utility in the mana base to be able to attack the format. The format is extended, a ton of viable decks, and so having just random one-of lands that do something really matters, because Life from Loam recycles those. And of course, a lot of the one-ofs are actually secretly, or 2-ofs are secretly 4-ofs. Like Forgotten Cave, Temple, or Tranquil Thicket are basically the exact same card. They just produce different colors mana, but we're using them for the same role.
Sure. So then once we get into boom bust, what was boom bust? Because they were very different halves of the card, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, so boom is colorless and a red. You target a land your opponents control and a land you control, and you destroy them both. So this was especially important because we had flagstones with choke air, which means I could do it on turn two. And the format had all kinds of things that were weak to this. Affinity, Tron. I played against a Martyr deck in the top eight. But you could just take out their land on turn two while not sending yourself back because flagstones and choke air would go find a dual land. The other play on turn three is you could target one of your fetch lands and then break the fetch land in response. So basically, this was like the epitome of the Conley Woods deck. It was the only PTQ I've ever won because I didn't play a ton of PTQs before winning one. So this was like basically my crowning low-level achievement to get me qualified for Pro Tour Honolulu. And I don't know, it just has so much land destruction. I had a couple other friends play it and do really, really well. And I played this at the PTQ with that zero like actual games. It was all just a theory, like this is how I want to attack the format. I want to deny people's mana and beat them with a giant Tarmogoyf from Neither Reliquary. And flame jabs were in there for against fairies. You would just take out all their Vendilion clicks and Pestermites and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a super sweet deck.
Before we move on, did you understand at this point in your career that you were, I guess, fairly unusual as a player in that, you know, when you just sort of say, oh yeah, you know, I didn't play any games, I just sort of went, yeah, here's a format, I'm going to know everything about it, so I'm just going to attack it like this, this'll do this, this'll do this, yeah, a little bit of this against this, and there it is, perfect, baked, done. Did you sense that that was unusual and not the way most people play their games of Magic?
Sort of. It's kind of the way I approach a lot of things in life. I've always kind of had just a different sort of mindset about things, and oftentimes it puts me on a different level. Whether that level is higher or lower is up for debate, but it puts me on a different level than people. So sometimes it's difficult to find someone else to work with and to kind of, you know, share your ideas with and arrive at the same area. So instead, a lot of times I would just go into kind of my own little corner, work on what I had to work on, and at the end I would try to come up with a product that I could maybe justify to somebody. And you know, if they would buy it, great. If they wouldn't buy it, I would be stubborn and be like, okay, well, I still think this deck's good. But yeah, it was just kind of my approach at the time. I did it for quite a few pro tours too. Testing is obviously significantly better if you have time to test, but I also felt like if I didn't have time to test, that I could at least come up with something that I thought would attack the format in a way that I was aiming for. And sometimes I would miss, of course, but a lot of the times I came out with at least what I had in mind. Whether what I had in mind was the correct thing to have or not was you know, a different story. But at least I would come up with what I had visioned. And I don't know, it helped me out a lot. I've had a lot of success at Pro Tours and Grand Prix doing that. Not necessarily because I wanted to, but just because it was what needed to be done.
Sure. All right, well, let's see what deck number 3 is. We go to Worlds 2011, which, as we know, was very, very successful for you, making the top 8 there. This is Modern. This is Geist-Zoo. Once again, I'm in the way of the end of the mana base, because once again, you've decided to do one of this, one of this, one of this, one of this, one of this. My goodness me. We see Knight of the Reliquaries again. We see Tarmogoyfs again. But this is a very different deck, not least because when you look at the spells, I mean, talk about efficient. You really liked to kill things with this deck, didn't you?
Yeah. So the big reason I had this deck here is there's a semi-famous story about me that Gerard has told many times, and so it's been sort of bastardized, if you will. Mm-hmm. But about me taking a lot of damage to my mana base back in Worlds 2009, which was my the first year that I was on the Pro Tour in Rome. I was 11-1 going into day 3, which back then Worlds was 3 different formats. Same for this Worlds that we're looking at here. And at the time it was extended to day 3, and I needed a deck that was safe and going to win. So I chose Zoo. Despite having kind of a brew with me, I decided to take the safe route and play Zoo. And as legend goes, I dealt a decent amount of damage to myself against a mono red player who had mulliganed to 3, and he beat me anyway. And I was at the point where I needed to go about 2 wins on the day to make top 8 probably. Yeah. And I was just not able to get there, and things kind of fell apart. And so this Worlds 2 years later, I was faced with a very, very similar situation where I was undefeated going into day 3, as you obviously remember. Mm-hmm. and I needed a deck for day 3. And I at the time I'm working with Channel Fireball, so I have a team there that wants to build these decks and come up with what their day 3 deck is. And we debated on Splinter Twin, we debated on all this stuff. Eventually, I just said, you know what, I'm going to play Zoo. The rest of the team also settled on a Zoo. They settled on a slightly different Zoo list. I wanted a Zoo list that had Kitchen Finks because I expected to run into other Zoo decks. So I was taking a very similar approach of let's play a safe deck that's going to beat these other decks. And it had a very sketchy mana base similar to back then. So this was kind of like my, I'm not down and out. I'm going to come back and beat this stupid mana base and this stupid archetype and do well. And luckily this time around, obviously I went undefeated again with this, only scooping to a couple teammates. But I was able to make it in the top 8 this time. So this was kind of like my reemergence and defeating that old Conley from 2009.
So I don't want to get anyone into trouble with this question, but it is a genuine question for you. On that final day, not day 3 where you played that deck in Modern, but day 4 where you come back and there's 4 of you in the top 8. To what extent is a team no longer a team once you reach a certain point? Because if I've got this right, you were the only one who advanced to the semi-finals. Everyone else crashed and burned. And then basically, once they were out, the rest of the guys went away and did other stuff. Now, to what extent is a team... to what extent would you have been expecting that everyone would have been on the rail sort of cheering with rah-rah Conley flags, as it were? And to what extent was that just exactly what you imagined would happen and what you would have done if you'd lost in the quarters and Josh had been in the semis or whatever?
Oh, sure. During the actual top 8, while everything was going on, I could have basically cared less. I wasn't thinking about it. Literally what other people were doing was not even on my mind. So at the time, it wasn't like I had a high priority on these people should be waiting here. Afterwards, I definitely had some expectations that my team would be there. But at the same time, they had just played in a top 8 match, etc. It made some sense that they went to go eat. I know I would have personally waited around. As I did with Team TCG Player whenever we had someone in the top 8. But that's just kind of like a difference in my personality. I'm sure that some of those people, like Luis, if he was alone, he probably would have stayed. But, when there's a group of 8 people and 5 of them are complaining that they're hungry and like to get food, it gets pretty easy to get pressured into going and doing that kind of thing. That weekend, certainly, that weekend as a whole, I definitely felt... slightly removed from my team during the tournament. Outside of the tournament, when we were working on decks or talking about sideboarding and stuff, I felt very much a part of the team. But whenever we stepped in the tournament hall, I kind of just departed from everybody, my friends, my people doing interviews with me, people asking for signatures and stuff. I would do all that stuff and I would go through the motions, but I was very much not in my own headspace. It was very strange. So that did not really change when my teammates were around. Like I said, even my good friends, I really wasn't talking to them. I would go sit down at a table with them and just sit there. It was kind of strange.
All right, so that's Geist Zoo from Worlds 2011. Junior Ianaga, by the way, still shuffling, as it turns out. That, by the way, was an April Fool. Yes, that's not actually true. He's not still there.
Yeah, I don't think you have to qualify that one as an April Fool.
Well, you never know, Conley.
Trust me, I'm well aware. I sat there through that.
Yes, you did. All right, so here we are. That's 3 of the 4 decks that Conley played. Let's find a 4th, and it is Grand Prix Orlando. This is the winner from his standard Grand Prix against Patrick Chapin in the final. Once again, I'm in the way, so let me just... you can see, let's just see how many... Actually, I've got an even better idea. Why don't I just do this? Oh, I've disappeared. Look at that. And now you can see 4 Primeval Titans and 4 Grave Titans, and you can also see 1 Glisser the Traitor down the bottom there. So, Conley, talk to us about what Black Green Wolf Run was and is and was trying to do.
Yeah, so at the time, Kessig Wolf Run was a very popular, very strong card. It was, the follow-up to Valakut, basically. Valakut existed before this. Once Valakut rotated, people were like, we still have these Primeval Titans. They're still very strong. What can we do with them? Kessig Wolf Run was the answer. And Red-Green Ramp was a popular deck at the time. However, I was finding that Red-Green Ramp was not able to match up to a lot of the decks in the format that were popular, which was Delver was probably the number 1. well, not probably, it certainly wasn't number one. But other decks like random Tempered Steel stuff was running around, and there was all kinds of variants that I just thought the red really didn't help you against. And so my buddy Brian Grury had sent me this deck that I kind of looked at for a little bit and didn't necessarily agree with everything right away, but it was an interesting take that had basically black instead of red. So I kind of took that, ran with it, added, these primeval are these Grave Titans, which were excellent against Vapor Snag, excellent against Geist of St. Draft. Things that if you played an Inferno Titan was just not true. They would you would deal 3 to them, they would Vapor Snag it, you'd go back to your hand, they would attack you for 6 with a Geist, and you would just get crushed. So I wanted my big threats to actually be strong into the format, so I switched to black, added Black Sun Zenith, which actually killed everything, which was not true of the Red Sweepers at the time, which had a maximum output of 3 damage at the time, so you couldn't kill like opposing Titans or anything substantial. Hero Blade Hold was another problem. But yeah, this deck was kind of just a combination of looking at the format and understanding what was going to be strong. Again, I had 0 games of testing going into this Grand Prix. I added the Gliss of the Trader interaction was in the deck for a while, and I was like, this is too cute, and I took it out. And then, like, 3 or 4 days later, I'm at the Grand Prix, like, writing out my deck list, and Brian Kibler walks up, and he's like, hey, have you thought about Gliss of the Trader? And I was like, yeah, I have. He's like, yeah, I think it's, like, reasonable. So I just jammed that one Gliss of the Trader in there, which I could grab with Green Sun Zenith, so it's not as random as it looks. And then with Ratchet Bomb, you just set up this combo that killed tokens over and over again, killed Flip Delvers over and over again. It was actually just really strong, gave you another kind of late game interaction. And yeah, I don't know, the finals against Patrick was certainly kind of an epic matchup, especially him being one of the deck builders that I had looked up to early on in my career. But yeah, it was definitely a fun weekend.
Now,
slightly unexpected, but I'll certainly take it.
Yeah, now that's really interesting, because normally when I ask the question about what did it mean to you to play against Guillaume Waffatapa, the Master of Control, or what did it mean to play the last Pro Tour champion, everyone says, in the nicest way possible, they say, nothing. I was busy playing Magic. It was the next game of Magic. I wasn't against the last Pro Tour winner, I was against whoever was shuffling the deck on the other side of the table. So the fact that you actually mention that is pretty interesting. That you would actually, this was a person I was up against.
Yeah, that top 8 was very real for me the entire time. First round, I played against Ben Friedman, who it was one of his first top 8s, so he was up and coming at the time. But I knew he was a very good player. Then I played against Paulo, who is obviously an extremely accomplished player, and I respected quite a bit. I knew and my teammate, the person who actually scooped me into that top 8. And then I played against Chapin. So I was actually very aware of all my opponents that top 8. There was no, this is just a normal person. And I actually think it helped me raise up my game a little bit. Like playing against somebody that you admired growing up, especially with a deck that you've created on your own, playing against his deck that he's created on his own. You're both playing these like rogue brews in this format that's dominated by this single deck in Delver. And you both got here with these lists that nobody had ever seen before. It certainly made this moment feel a little more special. Also, going over that matchup with my teammates beforehand, we'd already discussed strategy and whatnot, and we all thought I had a favorable matchup if I played it correctly. So it did help to have a little bit of confidence going in, thinking that if I knew what I was doing, I was going to get out of it.
Okay, so final question on this one. If you had, for the sake of argument, made the top 8 but not gone on to win the whole thing, how much difference would that have made to how you felt about the deck and the tournament? I guess what I'm really asking is, are you results driven, or are you I know I did the right thing driven?
I'm pretty much I know I did the right thing driven, but again, because I do things so differently than other people, for other people, they tend to need results from my decks to validate them. A lot of times I'll bomb out of a tournament or whatever, and I'll be the only person playing my deck, so the sample size is so small. But, if I go, let's say 6-3 on day 1, don't make day 2 of a Grand Prix, people assume my deck that I played was bad. And that could be the case, of course. So I can't really fault them necessarily for thinking that. But at the same time, I know the truth, and I know that I tested for the format, or that the matchups I had were ridiculous, or I mulliganed a bunch, or whatever, or I just didn't get to play Magic. Versus the times where I play a bad deck and I go, okay, this is just stupid, this is me being stubborn. I also know those times. So a lot of times to the outside world, those look exactly the same. They look as just, Conley played a crappy deck and failed with it. But I have to, the burden comes on me to somehow justify the times where I'm like, no, guys, this deck was actually good. I just didn't do well with it, but trust me, et cetera, et cetera. The Dredge deck was a good example, or the modern day Dredge deck of last year/year and a half ago. I played that deck in multiple Grand Prix and did not necessarily do that well with it. It picked up some popularity simply because it was a novel deck that people wanted to check out. But then once Ari Lax did well with it, after getting my list and working on it with me and stuff, people started recognizing it as a real deck, and it only was in the spotlight for maybe a couple months as a viable tier 1 strategy. But it took me 6 to 8 months of working on that deck to even get it to that point. And if I hadn't personally been persistent, I think would have passed it up and it would have moved on.
Well, there is a man who is certainly very committed to coming up with the right list, and we've certainly seen lots of ones all over our screens. One of this, one of this, one of this, one of this. You're the sort of person who'd play 1.5 if he could, aren't you?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, those are 4 decks that Conley did play. We'll be back with him in a few minutes with the second half of Desert Island decks with 4 decks that he didn't